There has been considerable interest in the last 10, 15 years in rites of passage. I think it's unfortunate that there are Christian rites of passage that are solely theological, that don't really do their homework on ritual. While I do believe that liturgy is a ritual, like there are things that we do as Christians, we get baptized and we do that, and yet we don't kind of think of that even as a broader possibility to work for transformation. And so rites of passage will always be culturally defined. So what I do at Nyack College may not be the same thing in the same exact way it's going to be done anywhere else in the world, you know? And yet it can be formed on specific principles. And so the principles that we form this rite of passage on are the relationships, so God, self, others, and creation. And we talk about what that means. And again, it's a process. When we talked about thriving, and Pam King kind of looked at your telos as a process. And that's how we were already looking at this rite of passage. It's like, hey, we're a little further on the journey and we're leading this process, but we want you to be part of it too. And we talk about voice, we talk about confidence, we talk about our bodies, and women's bodies have been denigrated throughout history. So we talk about loving our bodies and respecting our bodies and understanding them, and so that's relationship with self. But relationship with others, what does that mean? Relationship with creation. You walk that out, and we all walk that out in different ways. But it's also ritual principles. So the research that's been done on rites of passage would say there are three primary things that make them effective. The first is it functions as an attention giver. So what does that mean? Like, you have to pay attention. I could tell you the story of, hey, I remember when I was in front of that college classroom and I shouldn't call myself a girl anymore. So to a certain extent, that was the beginning of a rite of passage, right? But I only kind of knew that 10 years later looking back. And so frequently we look back and we say, oh, that's when I changed. Oh, that's when that transformation happened. But if you pay attention to it when it's happening, and you in fact do ritual that help encourage that transformation to occur, it's so much more effective. And then the second characteristic is it has the purpose of transformation. And so the purpose is not just to say, hey, learn a couple new things. Hey, read a book. Hey, do this. It's just like become fully who you are is what we're seeking to do when we do this rite of passage. So at Nyack College, when I do this, everyone from the president to the adjuncts have been involved. And not every time, they all know what's going on. So it became part of the culture. And it has to be part of the community. Because, okay, so you might go off on a retreat somewhere and someone's gonna say, okay, you're a woman. But if you come back to your community and the community doesn't recognize that, it doesn't matter. Like when you look at tribal society, and particularly with male rites of passage, like a lot of female rites of passage were done when a woman had her first period, and theirs were a little bit different. But particularly with male rites of passage, they would leave a boy, go out into the bush, prove themselves, and come back a man. They would be in a different location. They would have different responsibilities, like everything. And not only did they know it, but everyone around them knew it. And so if the community can be involved in it, it can't just be, hey, I'm gonna go do this and call myself a woman. That's good. But to have something that's gonna be really effective has to be a culture changer. And sometimes when I say that, I feel like, okay, that's asking for too much. But it's the best way to do it. So we call this adolescent rites of passage. That's kind of the area where I'm like, okay, you are an adult, or you are a woman, or you are a man. But what about other times? What about, like, that's a huge transition, going from being a child to being an adult. And if we mark it, the adults will be better empowered to live well in our society. Like, we all go through different transitions and we'll have many rites of passage. But it is a rite of passage for someone to get married. And what's kind of fascinating about that is that it's more clear on the female side than it is on the male side, because she changes her name. But it's a transition when we go through grief, when we lose someone. And how do we understand grief theologically, loss? How do we understand that psychologically? And then how do we as the church help people move forward? And how do we continue throughout lifespan? And how do we bring psychology there? Because without that, honestly, I think we're just gonna screw it up.